Kentucky Senator Rand Paul and White House medical advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci engaged in a heated debate on Wednesday at the Monkeypox virus Senate hearing. Here's a clip from the exchange.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And so
if she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
Now, of course, to be clear, that clip wasn't actually about monkeypox, but rather about comments that Dr. Fauci made in 2004 regarding the flu vaccine and whether people should still get their shot post-infection. So in this latest standoff, Paul challenged Fauci about why his previous comments seemed to contradict official guidance about COVID-19, which included urging parents to vaccinate their children even if they've already had coronavirus. Here's a little more from that exchange.
We wonder, why you seem to really embrace basic immunology back in 2004 and why you seem to reject it now.
Well, I don't reject basic immunology, Senator, and I have never denied that there is importance of the protection following infection. However, as we have said many times, and as has been validated by the authorization by the FDA through their committee and the recommendation by the CDC through their committee, that a vaccination following infection gives an added extra boost. And that film that you showed is really taken out of context. I believe that was when someone called in who had had a reaction to a vaccine and asked me through a telephone in the interview if they should get vaccinated again. So it was in the context of someone who had a reaction. And as a matter of fact, Reuters fact check looked at that and said, Fauci's 2004 comments do not contradict his pandemic stance.
Actually, words don't lie.
So, interesting exchange. Fauci saying that he was specifically recommending that for someone who'd had an adverse reaction to a vaccine, and almost, I think, reassuring them that, but since now that you've had the flu, that's like getting vaccinated. But I do take Rand Paul's comment that, and this is generally true, that we don't, when we talk about, or when the CDC talks about, when the medical advisors talk about how protected you are from COVID, they say, have you had a booster? However many shots you've had or boosters you've had, whether you've had COVID itself should count as one of those, because it does offer protection the way those things do. And there, in general, there's not been enough conversation about, well, have you had it? Because that's, if you're saying people should get vaccinated and then people should get boosted, well, it's like they've been boosted if they've had it. Now, maybe they should get an additional booster beyond that, but it's not.
Is that true? Because my understanding was, and again, I agree with you that there should be more conversation, because I don't know. I'm sitting here saying my understanding is, but my understanding is that getting COVID gives you about a month or so of booster-esque protection, that you're unlikely to reinfect. Although we did see people Joe Biden get reinfected very quickly, and that's
but that was a Paxlovid failure thing.
Okay, but we've seen some high-profile people. Even Anthony Fauci had multiple infections.
But both those cases are different. The Paxlovid rebound thing, where somebody I know who's Ron Bailey, who writes for us at Reason Magazine. His theory is if you take some people who take Paxlovid. Paxlovid does such an effective job at shutting down the infection, you don't develop antibodies. So then when they finish the course of Paxlovid, it just it's not like you're getting infected again. It's your body hasn't on its own fought it off yet.
Sure,
you have to go through that.
It seems to me that the issue really isn't whether or not COVID protects you. I think that's pretty much broadly acknowledged. The question is whether or not it protects you for as long as a booster would protect you. And if it's worth getting the additional support of a booster, if in fact getting COVID only protects you for a month or so, and if in fact the booster protects you for longer than that. So again, this does feel like one of those times when this isn't a particularly political issue. I know that because of the way that certain people in the Biden administration and the CDC have kind of wielded the idea of science as a weapon, what I'm about to say is stigmatized now. But at the end of the day, I really do I want to know the science on this.
Well, I don't think they're even claiming that the booster protects you for longer than having just had a prior infection does. Because in fact, they're not claiming that the booster or the vaccine at all will prevent, they just don't make that claim now, that it even prevents you from getting, from catching the illness. Now, our best guess, it seems like it probably does give you maybe some protection for a little while, but it's not saying that. It's just saying that if and when you do get it, you will have less, you have much less likely of experiencing severe disease. So that's the only claim being made by it right now.
This booster is the first new COVID intervention that is actually tailored to the variants that are out now. And again, I think that part of it's nobody's fault, but until the thing is out there and we start to observe how it works,
they literally don't know because they didn't have time to test it on tons of.
So we will find out in time how effective it actually is. But I thought that the hope was that because this one is actually tailored to the variant, the likes of which we haven't had since the very first round of shots, that it will have a more protective effect. The way that it seemed like the vaccines did have more of a protective effect in the summer of 2021 than they have had
subsequently. They were right. Then Delta was, but that's when Delta was kicking up,
came in
and then it was
exactly.
We don't really know. It seems like both the prior infection and various boosters offer you. There's a window of actual protection, maybe from transmission. We don't exactly know how big that window is. It could depend on the strain. It could depend on the individual. It could be very small. It could, for some people, just happen to be larger. And then there is also, in both cases, greater protection against severe disease. So they're kind of comparable things. Now, obviously, to get the protection of prior infection, you have to actually get COVID, which is the very thing you're trying to avoid.
Right.
So it's not. I'm not saying they're like the same thing. But what Rand Paul really does harp on in these hearings, I think correctly, is that especially if you're trying to resistant people, people who are resistant to getting vaccinated, if they've not been vaccinated and they've not had COVID, and they're older, particularly if they fall into a risk category, it really is important for them to get vaccinated. And you could make that case to them. But if they already have the antibodies, they might have some protection, quite good protection against severe disease.
And is Fauci arguing against that?
Well, then they get into it.
Yeah,
Rand Paul doesn't think he emphasizes that enough. Well, but then when we're talking about kids, because we're requiring it in in DC schools, again, don't want to talk about this again, but they're going to require even kids, young kids, or high school age kids, I forget exactly what the age cutoff is, but to return to school this fall, you're required to be vaccinated. But something like 70, 80%, maybe more, we don't know, somewhere around there, have already had COVID and thus have the equivalent protection of like one layer of shots. And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it doesn't make any epidemiological sense anyway, because it's not really doing anything for cases to require those. But that, Fauci will say, well, I'm not recommending that. But maybe he could speak out against that. Maybe he could say, do not mandate this for kids. It's worse for their health to not have them in schools, especially when most of them have the vaccine equivalent protection. Maybe it should be up to them to get vaccinated if they want to, but they have vaccine equivalent protection.
You're talking about just the DC school mandate.
Yeah.
Well, again, very happily from your camp's perspective, that's the only mandate that seems to be left in schools around the country, and Dr. Fauci will no longer be around very shortly in the position that he's in to be the focal point for all of these kind of criticisms. So I'm curious to see how politically relevant these kind of concerns continue to be a few months from now, as it does seem like there's growing consensus about what needs to be done because of folks like you who have really been ringing the alarm bell, I think rightly so, about some of the inconsistencies that have come down the pike.
Well, and many on the left have grown tired of the kind of endless mandate regime and how that actually conflicts with a kind of my body, my choice ethos. And I think everyone is kind of coming around to the DC might be like is almost virtually the literal last holdout for some of these incredibly strict mandates or mandates on populations for which makes absolutely no sense to have one. So glad hopefully we don't have to talk about it very much anymore, but we'll see.
A dream.
More Rising right after this.